Okay. Well, it's just after 1:15 Central Daylight Time, and welcome back from break, whatever time zone you happen to be in. I'm really excited for this next session. Angelika Jones has a master's in applied positive psychology, has a great deal of experience in forensic interviewing, and is, of course, a resilience expert. And so I'm super excited to welcome Angelika Jones to talk with us about foundational resilience. Hey, Angel, how you doing?
Hey, Niels, thank you so much. I am so excited to be here this afternoon, and I'm going to try to make sure that I rein in that excitement and try not to tell everybody everything that I know about this like I really want to, and try to give them something actionable, give everyone something actionable to walk away with at the end of this session. So I am going to go ahead and pop my slides up and we'll get the show started here. So, resilience is a real buzzword, right? And I started to become interested in it when I was working as a forensic interviewer. And I saw that the team around me, the team of professionals, social workers, prosecutors, law enforcement, mental health professionals, victims advocates, they were really being stressed on a daily basis by the work. And it was causing some real problems. People were having to leave the field and go do other work. And they were really committed and wanted to be able to do it. But this day-to-day wearing down on them really forced them to step away. And I started thinking there has to be a way to address this. People that want to stay in the field but just aren't able to cope effectively. So I started doing some research on my own. That led me to the University of Pennsylvania positive psychology program, as Niels mentioned. And that's where I started to really dig into resilience. And I was lucky enough to be part of the Penn Resilience Program and work with educators and also with military to train these skills. So today I want to bring some of those skills to you. And the one skill that I think is the most foundational, all resilience, in my opinion, is built on the ability to work this one strategy that we're going to talk about today. And I can tell you, I use it every day. I've seen it change lives. I've seen it change career trajectories, save marriages. I'm not overstating this. This is a really powerful strategy. And just on a day-to-day basis, I'm just coming back from a weekend with my family in Atlanta, and I had plenty of opportunities to flex my resilience muscle in dealing with my family this weekend. So let's get in here. Here's what we're going to do today, how we're going to stay on track. First, we're going to talk about resilience as we define it. We'll kind of mull on it and think about what components come together, and we'll look at the formal definition. After that, we're going to jump right into this formula, and we're going to talk about how to do it. What does it look like in real life? Next, Niels and I are going to do a partner practice. We're going to do a little role model to set you up for a longer partner practice session where we'll go into breakout rooms and you all will get to kick the tires on this strategy and try it yourselves with your own daily adversities and see how it works, see how it can kind of shift your perspective and change some outcomes for you. Then we'll come back into this space and we'll debrief. We'll talk about what you discovered, clarify any questions that you have, talk about some other things that you may use to build on the strategy that we'll talk about today, and go from there. That'll be a wrap. So let's get into this resilience. Let's crowdsource it. I am interested in how other people define resilience. So what I want you to do is first just take a few moments to reflect internally on what you think of when you hear the word resilience. What are some things that come to mind? Maybe they're phrases, maybe they're different components that we add up that make us resilient. Think about that for just a few seconds on your own and then pop them into the chat. And Beth is going to help us after a few minutes. I'm going to give you guys a chance to think and drop some things in there. And then Bev will look at that chat and we'll pull some things out.
Yeah, so we're seeing a lot of bouncing back. That seems to be one of our main themes, and bouncing back specifically from what rough situations. Another comment that comes is we don't just bounce, we may bounce forward and we come back stronger. And it's moving forward even when it's hard. And there's a sense of optimism about resilience. And similar to that is handling challenge with positivity. There's an element of hope in resilience and the ability to surf versus fighting the waves and weathering the storm. It's an adaptability, it's an overcoming and growth, and it involves confidence and self mastery.
I love it. You guys sound like you have looked into this a little bit yourselves and paid attention. A lot of those things come into play there, and that would make a great recipe for resilience, putting all of those things together. So let's take a look here at a formal definition. So this is the work of Ann Maston and colleagues, and she did this work in the late 80s and into the early 90s. And the first 3 points here in this formal definition that we'll use today to make sure that we're all on the same page. The first 3 are from Maston and colleagues. And the first one is overcoming our past. So we all have childhoods, we all have things that happen to us when we were younger, when things were out of our control. And sometimes some of those things that have happened to us need to be overcome. If we carry them around with us, they can really inhibit our ability to be resilient. They cause us to tell stories about ourselves and buy into those things. And so being able to overcome those past experiences is really critical to resilience. Another thing is just these day-to-day stressors that we encounter, right? I mean, when it comes down to it, if we can't be resilient on an ordinary Thursday afternoon, then how effective are we going to be at managing those big adversities that come our way, right? Really important to remember that it's the everyday stressors, and those are practice for that resilience muscle, the more effectively we handle those things. The next thing that Maston and colleagues defined was this ability to recover from setback, and that was that bouncing back, but not even, you guys are on top of it too, it's not just bouncing back, but it's that bouncing forward further than you were before the adversity hit. And so being able to do that, there's a formal clinical name, post-traumatic growth, that comes out of that. I hope that at least some of you have heard that. And that is really a good way to look at resilience. So making sure that we're able to recover from those setbacks. This last point here, number 4, about reaching outward. This is by Karen Rivich and Andrew Schad, and they talk about we don't practice resilience in isolation. So we need to be able to reach out and ask for help. Resilience isn't going it on your own. It's this ability to connect with people, but also, and this goes to, I heard optimism and hope in that definition that you guys came up with. So thinking about the pursuit of meaning, of purpose, of growth, all of those things can be summed up in that hope and optimism bubble, right? So this is the formal definition that we'll be using as we go forward today and what we're aiming for in this strategy that we're going to learn. So now that we have talked a little bit about what resilience is, let's think about what resilience is not, because there are some fallacies floating around out there. Sometimes people think that resilience is all about being happy. Positive vibes only. You see it all over t-shirts and mugs, and everybody's spouting this lately. The more I train this, the more I see this positive vibes only splattered all over everything. Well, resilience is not positive vibes only. You're gonna practice this strategy, and at the end of the strategy, it may be effective and it may be building your resilience, but it may not mean things are all rainbows and unicorns, right? You are still going to experience maybe some not so positive emotions. What we hope to do is diminish the counterproductive emotions that come out of it. And that's what being resilient is, being able to, another one of the phrases that I heard, kind of weather that storm. You guys had some great metaphors there. So that's what we're talking about. It's not happyology, it's not positive vibes only. The next thing it is not, resilience is not, it's not trauma or adversity specific. Remember what we just said on that last slide. This is day-to-day stressors, managing the day-to-day little things, the kids being late in the morning, work from home struggles. I mean, COVID has really challenged our resilience this past year and some months now as we're heading into it. So lots of opportunities to really exercise and build this skill. But like I said before, if we can't do it on an average Thursday afternoon, when the big stuff hits, when the rubber hits the road, we're going to be hard pressed to pull these strategies out of our pocket and put them into motion and really be effective at overcoming those bigger adversities that we encounter. And the final thing that resilience is not, it's not binary. And by that I mean, this is not a talent. This is not a trait. It's not something that you're born with. Resilience is a learned skill. Now, we all come into life and our adulthood with a kind of a set point of resilience. But the good thing that we know, the research tells us, is that we can build that resilience. And the way to do it is really by tuning in and practicing being resilient. And this foundational skill, this strategy, is going to help you to do just that. So let me stop here. Any pressing questions right now? We haven't really gotten too into things. Bev, do you see anything popping up? Anything happening there? Or are we good to go ahead?
We are good to go ahead. And folks, do feel free to pop questions into the chat or brave the storm, unmute yourself, speak out loud. This is as much as we can make it a safe and brave space that we welcome.
It is. And the more we interact with this, the more we're able to incorporate the learning. So, all right. So the foundational formula. This is as simple as our ABCs, right? We're going to start out, and I'm just going to give you an overview of the whole formula. So we're starting with A. A is adversity. And adversity is a trigger. It's something that happens to us in our life. I will use an example that we'll go through this one with. So one adversity that I face regularly is I live in the DC area. I drive in DC traffic. When I go from Route 50 onto the Beltway, the lane narrows on the ramp. So you're merging and getting ready to merge. And that is one of the biggest tests of my resilience right now. After being kind of locked down and not having to manage traffic, that adversity, when someone cuts me off or 4 people are trying to get in, people just can't merge nicely. That is a real trigger for me. So that's a regular day-to-day adversity. So what comes next? Beliefs. Beliefs in Brene Brown's world, she calls them, and I love this, the stories we tell ourselves. These are the thoughts that come flooding in immediately. They are right there. As soon as that adversity hits, there are thoughts coming at us fast and furious. And those are beliefs. There are interpretations of the adversity. So after our beliefs are consequences, right? There are consequences. In my case, my belief about that traffic, some of the people that I see, some of it I don't even want to share what those beliefs are. I'm embarrassed to say it out loud outside of my car. But those beliefs that I have drive some consequences. For me, that might be laying on my horn just a little too loud, riding the bumper of the person in front of me and not letting someone in, right? Those are counterproductive behaviors. Those are counterproductive emotions, and they stem from the counterproductive beliefs that I had based on that adversity. So this is just a chain of events that happens so quickly. This is where we get into the actual building of resilience. Once that ball is set in motion, the adversity happens, our beliefs come flooding in, the consequences start showing up in our body, in our behavior, in our emotions. We have the opportunity, somewhere, ideally, the goal is to do it during those beliefs, but we can catch ourselves as those consequences start to come to us and dispute those beliefs. We can shift our thinking. We don't have control over the adversity, but we do have control over our thinking. We can take, in the military, we call it a tactical pause, and really just slow things down, think about our thinking, and in changing our thinking, in reframing our thinking, we can change our consequences. And that reframing, that disputing our beliefs and looking at things from another perspective is that disputation piece of it, right? We're disputing those thoughts. And then the final step in this equation, this formula, is the effect. If we're able to effectively dispute counterproductive beliefs, then we can expect to have a different set of consequences than those that initially followed our in the wild beliefs that came flooding in first, unchecked. We might not be able to ever stop those thoughts that initially come in, but when we dispute them, the effects can be very different. We can stop ourselves from engaging in those knee-jerk reactions, and we can control our emotions and our behaviors and even our physiology. You know, if we get kicked into fight or flight, we can down-regulate that just by changing the way we thought through this disputation. Right? So now I'm going to jump in and we're going to break these all down a little bit. So adversity. When we think about adversity, when we're walking through this, like I said, we're really going to slow it down. I want you to make sure that we're focusing on the trigger. It's that snapshot moment when something happens. It's that one guy that tries to cut me off. In this example that I've got some images here, we'll follow this one along. It may be looking at a financial statement and noticing that you've taken some losses. Things are going downhill in the past 3 quarters, right? So if we think about it as the who, what, when, where, we can really narrow in on that snapshot, that moment that flipped the switch and triggered those beliefs. So who? I was in my office, I pulled up the financial reports, I noticed yesterday that we've been taking some losses. That's the adversity, that's the trigger. So when you're going through this exercise, make sure you keep it really concise there. The next thing that we're going to look at here, the next step, is those honest, uncensored self-talk beliefs. Sometimes they are not very nice. Our brains can really run away with us. And sometimes we can really ruminate and go down a really deep rabbit hole quickly. So in this case, looking at those financials, I may think, I'm going to go bankrupt. I'm going to lose the house. There's no way. Financial ruin is inevitable, and I might as well just give it up now. That's my interpretation of that adversity. That leads to our consequences, right? So when we look at the consequences, again, this is what we feel, what happens in our body, and the behaviors that come from that. So if I think that I'm going to go bankrupt, that it's hopeless, that I'm losing everything, then I might have emotions of anxiety and fear. Some of the behaviors I might try to numb, maybe with alcohol or television or food, whatever my vice of choice is in that situation. And physiologically, I may feel some tightening in my chest. I may feel a little jittery. All of those things that happen in our nervous system when we're not really regulated. So those are our consequences, and they stem from that counterproductive thought that I'm going to lose everything. And then finally, we're coming down here. Oops, let me go backwards here. To disputation. This is where the change happens. So stopping, taking that tactical pause and thinking back to those thoughts that drove those consequences. Which thought was it that I need to dispute? What set off that chain of events that took me in a direction I don't want to be in? And once we find that thought, for me, it's I'm going to lose everything. I am going to try to dispute that thought with evidence, thinking of alternatives, and thinking about some other implications if it is true. So, evidence might sound something like, that's not completely true because I've suffered losses before and haven't lost everything. Alternatives might be something that sounds more like, another way of looking at this is, I'm going to face some challenges and I'm going to come out on the other side stronger because I'm going to have to find new ways of doing things. And implications, oh, I think I just messed up implication. I think I just flipped those. Alternatives might be, another way of looking at this is, I'm going to find new ways of doing this. Implications might be, yes, I may actually have to file bankruptcy, and I know that I can recover because this is not the only business that I have. I am resourceful. I have lost things before and come out on top, and I will pivot and come through this again. So it's really just finding one of those three, or even a mesh of them, that effectively counters those thoughts that are causing the counterproductive consequences. And then finally, the effect of disputing those counterproductive thoughts, those counterproductive beliefs, will likely produce different consequences. Ideally, if not providing a sense of hope and putting it completely behind, the goal is to at least lower that anxiety for me, right? So the effects of this cognitive restructuring, thinking differently, thinking about our thinking and challenging our thoughts, can reduce the negative consequences over time and ultimately will rewire the shortcuts that our brain takes. And we won't take that same path, that same knee-jerk reaction. Those counterproductive thoughts will occur less likely. Makes sense? Let's check in real quick.
So right now, no questions in the chat, though you had a couple of people saying, I share your pain with DC traffic or traffic in general. And we're at about 1:40 or 2:40 Eastern.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Bev.
Sure.
This is what I mean, I want to just tell you guys everything. So Niels, you want to pop in here with me and let's do a guided example. I'm going to pop in with Neil and we're going to role play how I might handle this in a coaching session. I want to talk about different ways to use this. We might use it reflectively. So after something has happened, we might ultimately, the goal is to use it in real time so that we don't suffer those negative consequences. And we can also use it proactively to plan for a time when we know we haven't handled things well in the past and anticipate how we might act and kind of write our own script ahead of time to get ahead of it. All right, so Niels, let's see. Do I need to unshare?
I think you're okay because they spotlighted our video. Is that right? I think we could just go right into it.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks. So Niels, I know that you recently changed roles. How's that going for you?
Well, now it's good, but I actually had an activating event the other day. As I changed roles, I was having a conversation with my new boss as we were navigating the transition. And he shared with me that he'd had a conversation with my old boss in which my old boss had said that I did not provide a transition plan.
Oh.
So that was a very significant activating event for me.
I can see how that might have been a trigger. So this was just recently, and that statement from your boss, tell me what happened after that. What was that like for you?
Well, first thing I thought was WTF. And then I jumped to a conclusion pretty quickly. The thing of it was, of course, I provided a transition plan. That's the very first thing I did as soon as my successor was named. And so then I thought, well, did he throw me under the bus? I mean, I know that when I'd reached out to him, he was seemed a little lackadaisical. I was trying to impress upon him, we don't have a ton of time, and I want to make sure I set this up for you, whatever you need. So when my boss said that, the conclusion that I came to, that, well, the story that I made up was, well, maybe he's just panicking because he didn't really move with a sense of urgency when it was time to do the handoff.
Right. So I can imagine that those thoughts that came at you like that WTF, and thinking about your successor and how he might have possibly thrown you under the bus might have led to some emotions and some other reactions there. Tell me about what came from that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was quite angry. It was the first thing. Well, shocked, I guess, surprised, because that is not what I expected to hear. And then followed by some anger and some anxiety, because of course I want this transition to go well. I want to do right by everybody. I want to make sure that my name is not tarnished, and that I do right by the organization. And so, when I heard that, I sort of got this flush of, well, I felt a lot of heat in my body, kind of all through my chest. I think I felt my cheeks getting a little bit red. So it was, again, an activating event for sure.
Yeah. So quick timeout, talking to the fourth wall here. So you heard, as Niels was talking, their emotions, some anger, and then the physiology, the somatics in our coaching language of what he was feeling in his body, that heat and the redness in his cheeks. And then what did you do, Niels?
Well, I kind of noticed that I was responding that way. So I tried to take a breath and try to just stay calm on the outside. And so I said, I'm very disappointed, and frankly shocked to hear that. So that was sort of my external presentation, was that I want to, of course, keep it professional. And then I wanted to figure out what I could do next to rectify the miscommunication, and figure out how we could make sure that there is a successful transition.
Yeah, so you were able to at least rein in those behaviors and not kind of knee jerk and lose control of the situation there. Keep things a little bit under wraps. That's great. So thinking about those thoughts that you had, was there, you said you had the WTF and that there were some other thoughts about your successor and what he might have done. Which of those was the one that really kind of kicked off that response in your body and those emotions?
Oh, I think the assumption that he had thrown me under the bus, um, right away started to spiral negatively, almost catastrophize about, that he had done that and what that meant, and uh, of course made this whole narrative up in my head.
Yeah, we can go down that spiral really quickly. So one counterproductive thought can really kick off a real chain of events that can take us off the rails. You sound like you kept yourself on the rails for the most part, but let's see if we can do a little something with that thought and try to see if there's another way to think about it that might have helped you to manage the emotional reaction that you had and that physiological reaction.
Absolutely.
So what's another way that you could have thought about that? If you were to step outside yourself and up onto the balcony and look down, how would you direct yourself to dispute that thought when it popped into your head?
Well, I think, recognizing that, um, it's kind of a high stress environment. My old boss has a lot going on. Even my successor has a lot going on, and it's possible that, well, first of all, clearly something did get miscommunicated. Whether it was that conversation between old boss, new boss, or even now that I'm on the end of the telephone game, where my new supervisors tell me, at least relaying back to me his impression of the conversation. So, recognizing there's probably information I don't have, and so trying to have some empathy to what other people are going through right now, um, so that I don't jump to conclusions. I used to always say, we always verify first reports, and kind of for that exact reason, is that it's easy to fly off the handle.
Right, right. And that's what happens sometimes. We believe our thoughts so wholeheartedly because our brain is telling us these things, but we forget that they're just thoughts and there might be information that we're missing. So really, really good there. And so when you consider those other ways of thinking about it, those alternative thoughts, using that alternative approach, what does that do to your physiology and your emotions when you're able to reframe it and think from that perspective?
Well, I think I start to calm down because, well, I move out of a victim mentality for starters. I start to think about what I can do that's productive and proactive. And I've got this image in my head of when you drop a pebble into a pond, and then when the ripples kind of come back, and then the water goes back to stasis, where you get back to that smooth surface. Um, so it started to reduce that anxiety. It starts to, again, help me think about what I can do from a productive standpoint to go get the information that I don't have and start to figure out how we can rebuild and work on the productive working relationship.
Yeah, great, great. That sounds like you were really able to walk through that and take a different perspective, and more practice with that, Niels, and before you know it, you'll be rewiring that brain and maybe having less of those thoughts in the first place. Thank you, Niels. I really appreciate it. So I
My
hope
pleasure.
that everyone else was able to hear in that example, in that role play, um, what it sounds like in real life to kind of walk through those things and how naturally one feeds right into the other. You guys in Feed Loop have the partner practice templates. I'm going to click to this next slide. And one side is going to be a blank that doesn't have these kind of prompts in there, and the other side, or the second page, will have all of these prompts to remind you of what we just talked about. And right now, what I want to do is check really quickly to see if there are any pressing questions before we break into the partner practice. We're going to break into groups of 3 and let you guys try this with one another. Take turns.
No, we're good. Got a comment. Thank you, Adrian, saying great demo.
Niels is fantastic, right? I'm just gonna bring him on and on the road with me and let him be my demo guy full time.
As long as we don't have to drive in DC.
Right. Exactly. We'll take the train. So now I want to let you guys get in there and give it a try. What I want you to remember, and just some pointers here going into it, because we have limited time, I want you to think of the small things that trigger you, that set you off. Maybe it's when the trash bag falls in to the can and you go to throw something away and people have thrown trash in that trash can and not pulled up that thing, these little pet peeves. Maybe it's the alarm clock going off in the morning and the first thought you have is not a thought that's the best way to start your day. Think about the little things that happen, those little adversities, and walk through those with one another, talk through them and get some practice. And then we'll come back here in who can help me with some time math?
Let's cut it back just a little bit since we're at 150. How would you feel about, would 15 work?
I think 15 would be great. So,
and you would like them to each take a turn being on either side of this conversation, right?
yeah, just let's see if we can try to, 5 minutes each, give everybody a chance to talk through it as quickly as, like I said, if we use simple examples, right? And if everybody doesn't do it, I trust that you all will work it out and we'll be around for a little while afterwards to talk through. So let's go to breakouts. So does it look like we're all back? I can't see the numbers on my.
Yes, I think so. Just judging on rough participants in the main room, I think we're all here now.
Great, fantastic. So let's jump right in here. What did people find helpful here? Did anyone have any aha moments or breakthroughs with our practice?
Well, my breakout room really got to focus on curiosity, which for me is a very good antidote for being frustrated and really helps with resilience, just being curious. So not everybody was able to make it into our breakout room. So we applied some of these concepts around, okay, how do we not get upset? How do we just move forward by saying, hey, what's really going on here? Did Niels really put together a transition plan, or what's really going on here, instead of just telling ourselves stories. At least that's where I took it. What did other people feel?
I think that's a great strategy, by the way. I think um, leading with curiosity and using that to question your own thoughts, leaning in on that curiosity and using it to be curious about what's that thought about? What information am I missing? That's a great strategy.
Angel, there's a wonderful comment in the chat where Catherine Sen is saying that her coach, Lee George, asked a great question. Who do you want to be in these moments?
That is a phenomenal question. I love that, because really what we're doing is we want to make sure that we are acting in a way that is aligned with our values, right? Having a sense of integrity about ourselves. Essentially we want to show up as our true selves, as our best true selves, especially with other people, right? And most of these situations, we are interacting with other people in these adversities. And so one of the things that I like to think about too is sometimes I have a tendency, my brain has a tendency, because I'm a bit of a nerd, to go to this idea of, well, that's not right. And I want to educate people. And I have to stop myself and say, is it more important for me to be right here, or to set someone straight, or to maintain and sustain this relationship? Is this in service? It's weighing those options and making sure that, is that the way you want to show up? Are you being true to yourself? I love that. Were there any challenges that people had with this? What was the struggle for you?
As people are thinking of struggles, I'm going to share what Ruchira shared, that for her personally, finding patterns in daily triggers and being prepared with the disputation statement.
That is an excellent point. And what I would suggest, if you really want to work on this and build this skill using this strategy, use that template yourself. Journal. You don't have to have it in a worksheet. You can just journal with this framework in mind and walk yourself through, at the end of the day, if there was something that you feel like you could have handled differently and had better outcomes. Walking yourself through this is practice that will rewire that thinking, even if you're not doing it in the moment. And before you know it, we are what we practice, right? And if we practice this, then it's going to become more who we are on a daily basis.
Another comment in the chat. I was also thinking about my teens' messy rooms. And then Catherine offers owning my irritation when I experience the daily trigger, and how the other person must be experiencing me. So understanding both, I own this, and noticing the impact. And Molly mentions approaching those moments that trigger with curiosity, like, what's really going on here? All caps, really.
I love it. I love it. And this really, there are times when I've taught this in different groups where I've called the presentation Thinking About Your Thinking, with a little asterisk that says, don't believe everything you think, because it's really about that curiosity. And sometimes our thoughts are accurate and still take us in a direction that we don't want to go. It kind of goes back to that, do I want to be right? I can be right, but that doesn't mean that it's how I want to be in the world and show up.
Yeah. Adrian offers that in conflict, it's helpful to remember this is happening for both parties at the same time. And she's wondering if you have suggestions for coaching two people who are unable to unwire the beliefs that keep them at an impasse. Any advice for her?
Oh my goodness. Well, I think that arming them ahead of time with this strategy and sending them with that homework can sometimes help. But it's just that repetition and walking them through it with this one. There are a ton of other strategies, and I'm happy to talk with you offline about those. Reach out and get in touch.
Yeah, which is a good point. There are a variety of ways you can fill out session survey input for our speakers. And on them, there is an option for you to opt in to being in touch. So if you do have a question for Angel, if you would like her to be in touch with you or to have your contact information, be sure and fill that out. Trish Perry offers, sometimes it's as simple, which is not simple, as bringing the prefrontal cortex online. Do we know when we're in an amygdala hijack?
Exactly. That you hit on it. That's one of those rabbit holes I love to go down. So if you want to talk about that, hit me up. I'm your girl. We could go on and on about that. I love it. Yes, the way our brain works and this new insight that we have in the past 2 decades about knowing all of this stuff is amazing. And it's just great to know that with strategies like this, we're able to control that and rewire our brains in a way that's more productive.
And your favorite demo guy offered a beautiful question. Do I want to be right or to be kind?
It's true. Do I want to be right or sleep on the couch? Yeah, kindness matters. And, you know, it's just really weighing the big picture and all the dynamics of these interactions that we have.
So
I might have heard that
Angel,
one from Marshall Goldsmith, but to your point, it applies in lots of different places, relationships in particular. Sorry, Bev, go ahead.
no, that's okay. So Angel, we're rounding out the hour. What are some of the final words you'd like to share?
Well, I think some of the most important things to take away from this are really, you know, thinking about what is going to serve you. What's your goal in those situations when we're triggered? And to that point about amygdala hijacks, I mean, it happens to us. We have these knee-jerk reactions. We are programmed to scan for danger and to react to those. That fight, flight, or freeze kicks right in. But we have the ability, when we practice, to take that tactical pause in the moment, remind ourselves that we're safe and that we do have control, and taking the opportunity to rethink and change the way we react and the consequences of those moments that those adversities trigger us. And
Perfect. Sorry, go ahead.
Going forward, just don't hesitate to reach out to me. I would love to. If you are looking for resources in this area, I'm happy to help. And I am a big proponent of giving this stuff away and changing the world one thought at a time, one adjusted thought at a time.
It is life-changing stuff. We really appreciate that, Angel. And as the slide says, we're kind of right at time in terms of the end of the session. But if you have a few minutes, Angel, to hang out, if there's any other Q&A or discussion that anyone would like to engage in, we invite you to stick around. Again, surveys, we really invite you to take a moment and take the survey. If you didn't get the link, you can use the QR code. Just hold up your phone, and most cameras these days, as soon as you just put your lens over the QR code, it'll prompt you the browser for the survey. And this survey, of course, is specific to this session. But given that this is our first run through, we really thrive on any insight and any suggestions that you have. So please do share that. Otherwise, please do take a break. Next session will start in just under 15 minutes. So 2:30 Central Time. And that will be with Spring Chang and the resonance code. And then we'll roll into the wrap up for day one. So thank you again, Angel. This has been fantastic. This has been a real treat. Really appreciate all of you being so engaged. This is a lot of fun.
And if you do want to hang out for another 10 to 15 minutes with Angel, please do. And we'll just tell you at some point, okay, time to move to the next session, but hang out for a while. She'd love to chat.
She's pretty cool too.
Thank you. I'm messing with my settings here. I'm trying not to look up too much.
I'm just gonna type in a chat that came from Feedloop, and I'm not sure when this came in about 4 minutes.
Oh,
Oh,
you
you
just
just slipped
muted
on to mute.
yourself, Chris.
Just came up 4 minutes ago, you said?
Sorry, this comment I just popped into feed loop came up about 4 minutes ago, so I can't place exactly where it came, but basically noticing, you know.
Yeah, somebody had made a comment about remembering there are two people in this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm still seeing 48, now 46 people logged into this session. I know some of you have put yourself off video and are wandering around, stretching, getting something to eat, taking a walk down the halls, checking in on your kiddos or your cattos or your doggos. But if there's anyone here who would like to pop off mute and have a chat, we'd love to chat with you. In fact, Angel, do you folks have animals at home?
Do we have animals? I have a cat, a kitten, a giant kitten.
A giant kitten.
A giant kitten, yes. Why do you ask?
Yes. Okay. Well, actually, for CCO folks, right as Niels was doing his beautiful lead in and Jan Rybeck was beginning her chat, my doorbell rang. And I thought that's very unusual. So I ran down the stairs and a little girl with a small gray kitten following after had been at the door. They wanted to know if it was my kitten, and she was trying to get away from the kitten, who was determined to follow her everywhere. As soon as she hopped into the car with her mom, the kitten saw me, came right over. So right now, folks, I have a kitten on the porch.
That's
But
great.
I'm wondering.
Market if you can't find his home.
Oh, you do have someone in the market?
My best friend just said, that's it, I'm getting a cat. I'm serious. So like yesterday I got a text.
Well, this one I know has a cold. I can tell by the nose and the eyes. And I'm hoping it's just a cold, because sometimes that's a forewarner of FIV, feline immunodeficiency virus. But Angel, I'm curious, have you ever needed to do the ABCDEs with your ginormous kitten?
It's an internal skill, and I do it all the time with him because he loves me a little too much. And so he likes to get in my face at 3 a.m. and all of these random hours. And I have to remind myself not to just push him off the bed, talk myself down off of that knee-jerk reaction to his extreme affection. Another great time that I used this, and I don't know if I told you this story, Bev, but I was driving in the car with my husband, and well, this is how I remembered that we used it. We were being pulled over, so that was an activating event in itself. And my role as the passenger was to open the glove compartment and dig through all of the papers that he shoves in there and find the current registration and insurance, right? So I'm pulling everything out, and it finally, comes out of there, and I come out with the things, and he talks his way out of the ticket, which was great. I was so proud of him, and slows down. And as I'm putting things back in, I find this piece of junk mail, just like a folded up envelope with the top ripped off. And on the back of it, I notice that I have walked him through this for a work issue and taken notes as I was doing it, listening. And then just kind of coached him through it on the back of a piece of mail that ended up still back in his glove box. But it was a pretty major event that he had going on at work. And I can't remember where we were driving at the time when I did it, but it was a nice little reminder to see that and to think about going through that and how easy it is to use this, how often we use it.
Yeah, it's great that the cheat sheet is in the car, because for ever so many reasons, cars can be triggering environments, let's call it.
Right. It would be great if I could have it pop up and have a little coaching on my windshield.
Yeah.
Well,
maybe we all need tattoos.
I don't know. I keep telling my husband I want Google in my brain.
Ooh.
And yes, his reaction to I'm a little bit more open to things, and I tend to think that everyone is altruistic and kind, and nobody do nefarious things with that. But we know that's not exactly the way the world works.
Yeah. So I'm thinking, Kristen, I want you to weigh in on this also. I'm thinking that we may not have hallway chatters. And so Angel, if you'd like to take a break before you sit in on spring's session, we could all just log off and go about taking a break and see each other on the next session. What do you think?
Fantastic. Yeah. Last call.
Yeah, I think that works. I'm not seeing anything in the chat either.
Great.
All right, beautiful people. Angel, thank you again so much. This was just smooth as silk and just beautiful information you're sharing.
You guys are my heroes. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity. I'll see you in Feed Loop in a few.
Okay.
Bye now.
Bye.